It's an honor and pleasure to be here. Thank you, organizers, for putting this together. Some mentors and friends here. I've done 2 stories with David and Jen for Geographic, one on eels, which are, to me, one of the most fascinating fishes. They make the opposite migration of almost every other fish, spawning in the ocean and living their adult lives in fresh water. And really a fish that to me is like a thread that ties the entire world together, these migratory fish that go between fresh and salt water. And because I see the world as one interconnected living organism, I'm going to show some pictures of things that aren't sharks, so I apologize for that. But my little presentation is largely about my personal lifelong fascination with the natural world. And as somebody who likes to draw and has a compulsion to write things down, also about depicting and documenting the natural world and what that means as a human being on this planet, also an animal. As it was mentioned in the introduction, I recently finished a project to paint 35 ocean fishes life-size, and just published this book called Ocean Fishes. Unfortunately, the book is not as big as a 13-foot Blue Marlin, but we showed each of the fish in reduced size and then put life-size details of the different fish so that the people who look through the book could get an idea of what the up-close beauty of some of these fish look like. In doing this project, there are a lot of challenges presented to the artist. My idea was not to paint a fish to represent a species in a field guide. There's no official representation of a Mako shark or a swordfish. Every fish is an individual, so I wanted to express that feeling by painting individual fish that I traveled to see and had a personal experience with. So the Mako shark, for instance, which is, to me, the most sharky shark in the sea, that really pointy nose, and was caught off Montauk Point during a shark tournament. There are these strange tournaments where people kill sharks and weigh them and get prize money and stuff, and a lot of people in the environmental community sort of are not approving of that. But anyway, I painted all these fish with the ocean fish as the top member in this trilogy, and then different other elements from the immediate vicinity of the fish, like the cactus are from Walking Dunes Park in Montauk and East Hampton, and the lobsters from the waters around that area, just to remind the viewer that there are other things living in the immediate ecosystem. This is a swordfish that I saw harpooned off Woods Harbor, Nova Scotia on George's Bank. I spent 7 days on a harpoon boat because the only real way to see a free-swimming swordfish is in places where they surface. And there's only a few places in the world where I believe that they surface completely to expose their giant dorsal fin and the top of their tail so that they can be spotted by fishermen and actually harpoon. The surface temperature has to be very cold. Barbara would know more about the physiology of these billfishes, but from what I understand, they need to sort of come near the surface to warm up some mechanism in their brain that sharpens their vision, and then they can go back into deep water to feed. This could be a myth. I don't see you nodding, so. But I don't really warm the heart. I don't make distinctions between myth and science. To me, they're both just different ways of knowing the same planet, and they're both wonderful ways of knowing the natural world. But I'd never really seen any depictions of swordfish that looked like the swordfish that I saw when I was talking my way on a swordfish boat. I drove up from Connecticut 22 hours to this little town in southern Nova Scotia, Woods Harbor, and I just went out to the docks and started talking to this captain who was unloading 16 swordfish. At that point, their heads and tails were chopped off. They were just a pale lump of flesh. And he said, you know, where are you from? I said, I just drove up to Connecticut because I wanted to see a swordfish in its living colors right out of the water. And at that moment when it first leaves its element, the water, and enters ours, the air, as a longtime fisherman, I feel that that's the moment that's most important to us in our legacy as predators. Unlike David, I don't depict the fish underwater, but at that very moment that they first leave the water, break that surface that abstracts our world, their world to us and our world to them, and then are first really hit fully by the rays of the sun. And it's an amazing, having had a lifelong love of fish, first trout in particular, that moment has always been really amazing to me, because the fish is lit within with these amazing colors that are pulsing and changing all the time. And then they're hit by the light of the sun, and not only do they have different colors when they're out of the water, but they're also reflective, so they're reflecting the world around them. And in doing these pictures, I didn't subtract my presence from being with the fish. So if I saw my reflection in the eyeball of the fish, I'd paint that in. Or if I saw a reflection of my turquoise rain jacket in the fish, I would even paint that in. But the swordfish has a huge eyeball and a really long flat bill. It also has these sort of ridges along the side of the fish that the fishermen said sort of like stretch marks that you don't see as the fish get fatter in the fall, and then as they get thinner at different times of year, I'm sure depending on where in the world they are, they get more visible. But also the captain, when I was first talking to him on the dock, said, you know, he immediately understood what I was trying to do in capturing these living colors, and he said, you've never seen a color blue on land like the color of a swordfish. It's this amazing purple blue color. And he said, if you ever met a girl with the eyes the color of a swordfish, you'd leave whoever you were with and go with her. So he had this whole spiel about the colors of a swordfish. And so within like a minute of meeting him, he completely got what I was trying to do, and he invited me on the boat for 7 days. They cleaned out the bunk where they kept the life preservers, and that's where I slept, with the next bunk about an inch in front of my nose. I tried to sleep on deck, but it was so damp and it wasn't comfortable. Anyway, so this was this project. I have lots of images I'm going to try to get through, and I don't even know when I started. But anyway, this is a sailfish from off the Florida coast. My love of nature started when I was a child. My father introduced me to nature through his love of birds. And I painted birds from Audubon's paintings of the birds of North America, but also from dead specimens that hit the window. This is, I think, a magnolia warbler. I think if I lived in the 19th century, I would have been a professional collector working for, you know, the Peabody Museum or something, going out in the field, killing things and drawing them. I don't enjoy killing things, but it's a way of bringing them close enough to you so that you can look at them up close. Of course, a photograph is a good way to do that today. So I drew birds from about 4 to 9, and then when I was 9 years old, a friend of mine introduced me to fishing, and I saw my first wild brook trout. This is not a brook trout, but I could not believe that such a beautiful living thing, this fish, lived in these little tannic streams near my house. You couldn't even see through the water because they're kind of tea-colored. These mysterious little creatures with red spots with blue halos and yellow spots and these beautiful olive-colored vermiculations on the back. And I fell head over heels for trout completely, and sort of started me on this mission to try to paint the diversity of the trout of North America, which eventually became my first book. But I very quickly learned in trying to, well, first I was looking for a book on the trout of North America and couldn't find one. So at like 11 years old, I thought, well, I'll do the book on the trout of North America. Started writing letters to departments of wildlife around the country to collect information on these fish, but that I didn't even know existed. And I started building a list of all the trout of North America, and I quickly realized that nobody could agree on how many trout there were, or even what a trout was. And even at an early age, it sort of called into question the systems we use to order and organize the natural world, the Linnaean system of taxonomy, even the idea of species, which is sort of this thing that nobody can agree what it is. I'll get back to sharks later, but this is another trout from Japan. The other one was from Slovenia. It was also a great vehicle for me to travel and see these different fish firsthand. So as a kid, I was painting them from descriptions in old books. Some of the fish that I painted in what became my first trout, I painted from one or two sentences in books from the 19th century, like American Food and Game Fishes by David Starr Jordan and Walter Everman. And they sometimes fish that were extinct, so there was no photographic material of them, sometimes not even specimens. So even though I was trying to depict these things accurately, they were largely works of the imagination. In that first book of 70 paintings of the trout of North America, it's probably about 60% imagination and passion of this kid who wanted to paint all these trout. But when I came back to drawing these ocean fishes, actually from life, from an individual fish, I realized that even if you're trying to depict them accurately from individual fish that you see, it's still an interpretation because these fish are so dynamic. Their colors are moving and changing all the time. So it kind of started to think about just what the images we see of nature mean. This is the headwaters of the Tigris River. After painting fish from North America, I started traveling through Europe and Asia looking for different other fish. That was from the headwaters of the Tigris. This is from from Japan. This is a Mongolian rental car. That's a Mongolian boy with a fish. But part of what I also learned is that fishing and people's love of fish is this universal thing that happens around the world. If there's water, there's usually fish, and then there's usually people trying to pursue the fish. Anglers, of which I'm one, are some of the most ardent conservationists. So it's certainly a resource that people should be tapping into when protecting even fishes like sharks. So after spending a good 20-something years painting trout and other fishes, I came to wonder why I did this and why humans depict things in the natural world at all. One of my recurring thoughts is that drawing is a way that humans come to know their world better, become more acute observers of their environment. Drawing must have had some evolutionary value in our past, perhaps made us more efficient predators because we were forced to learn the physiological differences between things, the way things moved. We could communicate through images the most advantageous place to throw the spear or whatever. But I became fascinated in general with our legacy of depicting things in nature. When Northern Europeans first had the technology to go abroad, they started bringing specimens home from other parts of the world. And before that, Northern Europeans only needed to know a certain number of creatures in their immediate vicinity, maybe 200 or so. The diversity wasn't that great, but when all this stuff started pouring back from the tropics, there was this sort of imaginative explosion, and the artists in Northern Europe started depicting things not only from flaccid skins and specimens, having to reimagine what these things were like in life, but from rumors. This is the first drawing of a rhinoceros by Durr, just from descriptions of from a rhinoceros that was on a boat headed to Lisbon that sank. It's a pretty damn good drawing of a rhinoceros for somebody who'd never seen one, when images of rhinoceri weren't available. And all these objects started being put in these cabinets of curiosity, collections these rich merchants would show their rich friends, which eventually became our natural history museums. So I started doing these sort of tongue-in-cheek pictures of creatures that had become their names in protest of being named by humans, because it was around this time when there was this overwhelming amount of diversity entering Northern Europe that Linnaeus came along and created this system so that people could communicate it all. But in my mind, and I won't go into too much detail about my opinions, there are of course great limitations to these systems. So these creatures remind us of these limitations. Turtle dove, the duck trout, I don't think they exist anywhere. There's a sailfish in the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. And I made these pictures where I left the names out of the, in traditional natural history paintings, you have the common and scientific name of the creature underneath it. And I left the names out because I didn't want people to be influenced by the name and replace them with these curvilinear lines that were my personal taxonomy, my personal expression of that creature's position in the ecosystem. And then I did these murals of bird silhouettes with numbers that sort of exposed our urge to learn nature through identification from the end papers of Roger Tory Peterson's Field Guide to the Birds, where you match the silhouette of the bird up with the name. In my mind, there are other ways into nature than just through learning the names. This is a commentary on the ways we choose things to protect in nature. This is a cockatool. It has a Swiss Army knife as a crest. And it evolved to be useful so that we would protect it. It evolved to mimic human industry in order to survive. This is a drill duck. It made some holes in the wood there. There's the actual specimen of one I collected on my street. Because, of course, the specimen is proof of the animal's existence. I have about 100 more slides I'm going to go through in 5 minutes. Ready? That's a taxidermied flying fox. And, of course, the tool of the collector. I'm somewhat critical, but also, well, anyway, these are some sculptures that are sort of manifestations of those lines in the other pictures. If a bone could, if the aura of an object like a bone could be expressed beyond itself, what would it look like? So there are manifestations of that space between that we can't quantify ourselves, but I feel is very important in the ecosystem. There's our near and dear Peabody Museum. There's Adam, who, of course, is the first great namer. There's a great story I love called She Unnames Them, by Ursula Le Guin, where Eve goes through the garden unnaming everything that Adam named so that humans could be closer to nature without having this barrier of the name between us and them. And then she hands her name to Adam and walks out of the garden. So we helicoptered into central Suriname. Suriname's a little former Dutch colony north of Brazil. I don't know if there's any freshwater sharks there. But we basically killed a lot of things, and from moths and snakes, but primarily birds. This is a beautiful painting from 1699 by Maria Sibylla Merriam, just an old natural history painting. But it gave me an opportunity to draw a lot of things from life. And seeing these snakes and birds freshly caught and unfortunately killed, I realized that not only do fish lose their colors right after they die, but other animals too. All these colors of the beautiful tissue colors around the eye and the beak colors fade very quickly. And there was this opportunity to sort of capture this life before they faded away. There's a painting of the toucanet. I would tell more stories if I had more time. There's some paintings I did in the field of the stuff. And then, of course, the name of the person who collected it and skinned it goes on the tag. So naming is a way of appealing to our egos and you know, kind of having our legacy preserved beyond our lifetimes. Anyway, so that all those other things I was painting through the years and thoughts about naming informed this ocean fish project because, again, I wanted to paint individual fish that I had a personal experience with. And the idea, it was kind of a quiet conservation statement. I wanted to, I felt like people didn't know how big a bluefin tuna was or how amazing and huge a blue marlin could be. So part of the idea was to just paint them and exhibit them so that people could know the scale of these creatures. But I also tried very hard to show the colors that I was seeing when a fish first came out of the water. These are bluefin tuna, which I never knew tuna got that big until I saw this photograph in a Citgo station in Chatham, Massachusetts. And the guy who owned the gas station was a tuna spotter. And he, you probably know him, Norman St. Pierre, but we started talking and he said, oh, I'll take you up in my plane to spot tuna. And then I went on this harpoon boat and watch them harpoon 2 800-pound bluefin tuna. And it was one of the most amazing predatory things I've ever witnessed in my life. I mean, a plane communicating the boat where this school was, a boat moving at 10, 15 knots, trying to throw a spear at a fish that's like 8 to 10 feet under the surface. It was unbelievable. I mean, if people fish for tuna this way, I don't think we would have any problems. It's the huge industrial scale fishing, not this sort of, not beautiful. Death isn't really beautiful, but I found it to be quite beautiful, this whole thing. And then you have this fish that comes out of the water just sparkling with colors and lights, and I just couldn't believe what these fish look like. And how do you depict that when it's so dynamic and changing? And there's blood, of course. And then there's the reflections of the people standing over the fish. And that's the painting I did back in 2004. So it's of a life-size bluefin tuna. Also, how do you take something that's like that around and depict it in 2 dimensions? Measurements are very hard to take, because if you take a measurement from the tip of the nose to the front of the eyeball or something, and then you try to just use that as a reference, you'll get a distorted picture. So I use sketches and measurements and photographs in these pictures. This is exhibited in Monaco as part of this exhibition called Oceanomania. I think Monaco is the only place in the world where tuna is illegal, bluefin tuna is illegal to eat, because the prince there, I don't know if he really wants to protect them, but it's his platform. This is the, don't put that on the web. This is up close of one of the paintings of a flounder. This is just in the studio starting a picture of a blue marlin. I'll just go through these really quickly because I've hit my limit. This is a modified lobster boat to go swordfish harpooning. There's the guy, Gilbert Devine, who told me about the blue-eyed girl. And there's the harpoon head gone right through the fish. There's the dorsal fin of the swordfish over his left shoulder. And then most of the fish, because they're not stupid enough to bring them aboard alive, because they would be very dangerous, they let them hang on a buoy for a couple hours and then bring them on the boat. And most of them come aboard like a coppery bronze color, but the captain said that occasionally one of the fish will flicker back to its living colors before it died. And that's what happened with this fish. Just one of the 13 fish that we got in 7 days. And it lasted about 5 minutes and then it went away. And I don't think many humans have seen that, the colors of a living swordfish on the deck of a boat. And I've never seen a swordfish depicted with this jagged line between the blue and the silver, which is how they actually look. It's usually like a straight line. And those weird ridges along the body. And then there's a notch on the top and the bottom above the tail that I've never seen depicted in a drawing of a swordfish, or the huge eyeball. It's just unearthly. It's amazing. Almost doesn't look like a swordfish should. I went to the Cape Verde Islands off West Africa to see a big blue marlin. It's a big fishing culture. After 5 days of fishing, we got one about it was 696 pounds. I just was observing on a sport fishing boat. It's a very expensive thing to do. The tail was almost 60 inches across. Just an amazing animal. In Cape Verde Islands, they eat them. Those are the guys that caught it, the sports. And that's me in the studio painting the marlin. And this is the painting right now in the New Britain Museum of American Art in Connecticut. That's in Philadelphia. So I've been exhibiting them. And I'll end with the Mako Shark at this shark tournament in Montauk, which for an artist or scientist is a good way to get genetic material and also imagery material if you're going to depict them. But, you know, should they be killing them? Of course, the Makos they eat. They stopped having blue shark tournaments in most places, I think, because nobody really eats them. At least the Makos are good to eat, but the teeth, you know, how else would you, unless you were David Doubilet with a camera and the shark was coming at you, how else would you be able to see those beautiful details? So anyway, I'll just go through, oh, this is a blue shark, but I'll just go through a couple of the other paintings. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.